The US and Iran have agreed to a memorandum of understanding expected to be formally signed Friday in Switzerland. But with Israeli strikes on Lebanon continuing right up to the signing, the big question hanging over this deal is whether Israel ends up blowing it up before it even takes effect. Joining us to discuss is Professor Mohammed Marandi, an expert in American studies at the University of Tehran. Mohammed Marandi, welcome back to BT Live.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a great pleasure being on your show.
Well, there's so much to talk about because, of course, this new huge breakthrough with this memorandum of understanding. There's like a draft, potentially a draft going around online that's upsetting people in Washington. And one of the most, I think, important or maybe newsworthy parts of this potential deal, this upcoming deal, is the Lebanon angle because of the way Lebanon can be used by the Israelis to torpedo it. Now, Iran has insisted that Lebanon be a part of any broader settlement throughout this war, and even struck Israel last week after Israeli attacks on Beirut's southern suburbs. And then today we saw that Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi warned that continued Israeli attacks or any ongoing occupation in Lebanon would violate the agreement with Washington, and that the U.S. must rein in Israel. And for his part, Trump has voiced anger at Israel over Lebanon through social media posts, and then reportedly a heated phone call with Netanyahu. But he hasn't really taken, at least so far, any concrete action beyond that, while Israel insists the deal doesn't bind it and says it will not withdraw its forces. So my question for you is, how serious is Iran about the Lebanon front? And do you expect an Iranian response if Israel keeps testing this, which we know that they will?
Well, first I have to go back a bit and point out that when the Israelis threatened to bomb Beirut and Dahia, which is the southern part of Beirut, for those who, I know you live there and you know it, but for your audience, some of them may not know that. Dahia is a huge neighborhood in Beirut, and probably during this period when refugees were flowing from the south and the Lebanese government was preventing them from going to many parts of the country, which is unbelievable. But in any case, that's what happened. Many of them went to Dahia. So probably when the Israelis were bombing, were threatening to bomb Dahia, it was probably half the population of Beirut, the entire Beirut. Half of it would die here under these circumstances, I would imagine. So the Iranians threatened them, and for a few days, the regime, they refrained from bombing. They just stuck to bombing other cities and apartment blocks and killing children in villages, women in towns, but refrained from doing it in Beirut. And then they carried out this small attack on Dahia. I mean, bombs blew up, but it was small because I think they wanted so that Iran wouldn't respond, so that Iran would calculate and say, well, this wasn't big enough for us to strike back. And then my guess is that they would carry out another small strike after a few days, and then another one after a few days, and then normalize bombing Beirut. Mm-hmm. But the Iranians said, no, you've crossed the red line, and we will hit you very hard. And they did. And in this exchange, it was the Israelis and the Americans that wanted it to end. So then Netanyahu again struck Dahia. And this is where it gets interesting, even more interesting. And he again murdered 3 or 4 people, I'm not sure. A family was murdered. And in the previous attack, I think 2 people were murdered. Just so we always repeat these things, that the Israelis are just constantly murdering people everywhere, slaughtering. Right now, as we speak, they're murdering in Gaza. They are slaughtering people on a daily basis. And the West is completely indifferent. The elites, the media, the think tankers, the journalists, the diplomats. But in any case, the Iranians again said, okay, we're going to strike very hard. This is the night before last. So Iran was about to strike, and I knew it because I also I was told so, and I tweeted that Iran will strike very hard, and the negotiations ended. The Iranians said we're not going to negotiate, and we're going to hit the Israeli regime. Trump, I don't know if I can say he panicked, but obviously he was very worried, and he quickly asked Iran not to strike. He insulted Netanyahu, and but more importantly was that, contrary to what Trump was saying, and contrary to what the Pakistani Prime Minister said a couple of days ago, there was no final text. And there were some significant differences that remain between Iran and the United States in this MOU. And it was stalemate. And it was unclear if we were even going to have an agreement. So Trump tells his people to give the Iranians the concessions they want. And at the top of the list, and at the beginning of the, now Iranian shipping is going through the Indian Ocean without any trouble since yesterday. Another one, though, as I said, at the top of the MOU, when it's published, you'll see that is Lebanon, that its sovereignty, its territorial integrity, and so on. All of this has to be respected. If the war, and you saw the Iranian foreign minister today saying that any attack on Lebanon, any occupation, that Lebanon, Hezbollah is a part of this deal. And so the Israeli regime, if it does not withdraw and end what it's doing in Lebanon, there's no peace. So the Iranians got that concession from the Americans, and the deal was announced. And so we are where we are. Now, does that mean that we are celebrating in Tehran? And, well, actually, some people are very angry in Iran, and they're saying that we shouldn't have signed the deal and we should have pushed harder and gotten a better deal later. But anyway, I've met a couple. I'm on the streets. I've met a couple of people who are very angry with me, as if I'm a negotiator. But anyway, when Dr. Zarif was negotiating the JCPOA, some people attacked me, and then when I went with Dr. Bagheri to help with the media, then too they attacked me. Now
you can't.
Whatever happens, I have to pay the price.
Yeah.
Anyway, there are some people in Iran who are opposed to the deal. There's no doubt about that. But I think that I do think in all it is a good deal. But it's not as if anyone is celebrating. No one here is naive, and no one believes that the Americans or the Israelis are going to carry out their commitments. And Netanyahu is, of course, Netanyahu. He's a genocidal maniac who leads a country full of genocidal maniacs. So I can't say what will happen in the future, but this is going to be a very complicated process. But Iran is adamant. Iran, under no circumstances, will allow the Israeli regime to remain in Lebanon and to continue killing Lebanese citizens.
I was thinking to myself today as I'm watching this news come out about the Iranian foreign minister saying, we're demanding Israeli withdrawal. And then there's news that came out that Hezbollah's media relations actually said that the Iranians have given them basically a guarantee that we are going to push for Israel to withdraw or we won't abide by a deal. And I'm just thinking to myself, wow, this must be a really hard day for the Lebanese prime minister and foreign minister and president who've been demanding that Iran stop interfering in Lebanon's sovereignty by getting it a ceasefire. Just wild to watch all this play out. But I wanted to ask you, one of the criticisms I've seen, and just very briefly, because there's two more questions I want to get to, and I want to make sure we have time to touch on it. But I want to ask you about Gaza, because I have seen some criticism or question about why Iran hasn't applied the same leverage it has to Gaza that it has applied to Lebanon. So I'm curious, what do you think the reason for that is?
Oh, there's a big difference. First of all, Iran was assaulted, and that gave Iran the international, let's say, support to strike back. If if the Israeli regime had not struck us, if the Americans had not struck us, especially this war, more important than the previous, much more important than the previous war. After this war and our 39 days of striking at Israel and the United States and its assets in the Persian Gulf and so on, striking the Israeli regime is normal. It's been normalized. But if we had done this on our own, at our own initiative before, do you think any of those countries that people consider to be our friends and allies in the global majority would have supported us? Absolutely not. Remember, Iran, and you know this, I know this, and your audience knows this. The only country that is standing up against genocide and ethnic cleansing in Palestine is Iran and Yemen and Hezbollah, which is not a country, and the resistance in Iraq. No one else is. No one else will take a stand. No one else will even cut ties with the Israeli regime. No one else will even cut trade. Right now, during this global energy crisis, the Aliyev in Azerbaijan is sending oil, cheap oil, to Netanyahu through the middleman Erdogan. Sisi is purchasing gas. Jordan is doing everything. So it is Iran on its own. Iran is standing up against the entire empire and its coalition, the Europeans, NATO, its local proxies, even those who are not directly involved against us, they are not helping us. I mean, NATO installations in Turkey and US bases in Turkey were working against us. So it's not as if Iran has all this global support and state support. Now Iran is being cheered on across the world. Even in the United States, the Iranian national football team is being cheered. But it doesn't have, it's, you cannot, Iran will not have support if it just starts firing missiles at the Israeli regime.
Well, I guess, but what I guess the question I'm maybe I should have phrased this differently. I guess the question I've seen people asking is the way that Iran is saying Israeli withdrawal, no more attacks on Lebanon. Why aren't they demanding the same thing for Gaza in this agreement with the U.S.? That's the question I've seen people raising.
Okay, well that's a different issue, but that is also a problem for a couple of reasons. One is that right now we're talking, Lebanon is under assault and there's no ceasefire. And so the war which is taking place is between the United States and the Israeli regime, Iran and Lebanon. Mm-hmm. And so Iran is saying, whatever, if there's a ceasefire with us, it's with Lebanon. If there's a withdrawal of forces, it's in Lebanon too. We are one and the same. Mm-hmm. So that's with regards to the current war. But Iran has also said that the Israeli regime has to end the slaughter in Gaza, and that will be discussed at the negotiations. Now, the problem, Gaza and Palestine will be a part of the negotiations, but the problem, Rania, is that regional countries went to Egypt and endorsed Trump's fake ceasefire and helped impose it on the Palestinian people. All of them, Abdullah, Sisi, Aliyev, Erdogan, from the Persian Gulf, from Pakistan. So it is difficult for Iran to push very hard because they'll say they already have a ceasefire. So what Iran will try to do at the time being is to say, okay, then force the Israelis back to the yellow line and stop the killing. That's because they have a ceasefire. Iran can't say, no, we reject this this ceasefire where tens of heads of state were there and they all endorse it. You have to do it's not going to work. But Iran, as you know, is the only country that helps the resistance in Gaza. Iran, no one here hides this fact. They are rebuilding their military capabilities. But I think that the burden that's on the shoulders of Iran and Hezbollah is no one else is helping with that burden. If anything, regional countries have only undermined it by assisting the United States in attacking Iran, by just cut off political ties and cut off
Yeah.
trade. That would have been, in Latin America or in Africa, how can you expect a country to break off ties with the Israeli regime when Turkey doesn't, when Egypt doesn't, when
No,
Morocco
those are
doesn't?
all very valid points. Those are all very valid points. But I want to make sure I get to my last question that I want to ask you while we still have time. And I hopefully we can have a longer conversation about all that in the near future. I wanted to ask you about, the details about the memorandum. We know from a draft that has been leaked or put out, and also various leaks from various sides. But Iran basically says it will retain a security and regulatory role over the Strait of Hormuz, alongside Oman, and then also you have U.S. is going to be unfreezing billions of dollars in Iranian assets that it had effectively stolen, alongside broader sanctions relief. And that's huge. I mean, those are huge, wins for Iran. So I guess, given all that, is this war a win for Iran and a defeat for the Americans? It surely seems that way if you look at the details of this. And it also kind of seems like the Americans have no choice. They either agree to this now or lose harder later.
For 60, Iran will maintain control over the strait, and everything that you said is true. Relief, of course, has to do with Iran's energy exports. No doubt that Iran won this war. Iran won the 39 days of battle with the United States and the Israeli regime and those proxies that assisted the Americans. And it's not that just Iran survived, which everyone across the world, people were stunned. It wasn't that Iran just survived, because many were saying if Iran just survives, they win. No, Iran, till the very end, were pounding them day and night. And the damage that Iran did to the US, to the Israeli regime, and to their proxies in the region was far greater than the damage they did to Iran. And in sheer in costs. Of course, Iran is trying to create an environment where regional countries neighboring the Persian Gulf will distance themselves from the United States and normalize their relationship and build a new relationship which would be beneficial to everyone in our region and would be very bad news for the Israeli regime. But in any case, then the Americans imposed siege warfare and they lost again. They were the one reason why Trump gave those concessions when Netanyahu struck Dahi again and Iran was about to fire its missiles, was because, in my opinion, this is just my own interpretation of events, my own understanding. He knows that the economy is about to go off a cliff and that in July things are going to get very bad and the shortages are going to hit and so on. So I think that he was afraid that Iran would fire missiles, which Iran was going to do, and then the Israelis would hit back and then Iran would strike and then there would be a few days of war until the Israelis would back down. And then this process would be delayed a few more weeks. And he probably just said, no, I have to get. So immediately before Iran fired those missiles, he went and gave those concessions. So Iran won the war, Iran won the siege, and so far Iran has won at the negotiating table. However, we do not trust the Americans. The Israeli regime is the most despicable regime in human history. So there's no way for us to trust them. So we're going to move forward without having any faith in the process.
Yeah, well, we'll have to watch for the signing on Friday. Apparently, there's already been an electronic signing, but there's going to be official signing in Geneva on Friday. It's kind of wild to finally witness this after 3 months of horrific war and just, an endless loop of Trump trying to win by, bombing Iran back to the Stone Age. But this certainly is not looking good for the Americans. And it's definitely a turning point in history for sure. Mohammed Marandi, I want to thank you for joining me. We look forward to having you back on soon.
Thank you very much for having me. So great pleasure.